authorities report that the crisis is over. Rescue crews clean up the aftermath as the rescue operation continues. Rumors of a possible plague outbreak have been discredited as international relief organizations continue to assess the situation.
We thought we had escaped.
Hey, wake up.
Jesus.
Get up.
We thought we had left this god-forsaken island. We were wrong.
When Dead Island released in 2011, it amassed something of a small cult following. It wasn't the best or most polished game out there, but it did provide a fun, cooperative zombie romp for up to 4 players. Not everyone liked it, but it did have its fans. So when I heard a new Dead Island was in development, I remained optimistic. Developing a sequel would be a good opportunity for developer Techland to tighten up the mechanics, add a bit more polish, and generally make the overall experience more fun.
Well, that was what I was hoping for anyway. First of all, I have to stress that Riptide isn't really a proper sequel since it doesn't innovate or improve upon Dead Island's gameplay in any way. It's an expansion pack. I can't even call it Dead Island 1.5 because that would suggest that the developers have actually changed enough to create a sort of middle ground between the first game and a full-fledged sequel, which they haven't. This is just Dead Island with a different story. It's like the first game and Riptide are 2 halves that together form the full Dead Island game. Clearly the team developed this game with "if it isn't broke, don't fix it" as their mantra. Well, there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. I mean, you don't want to change up the mechanics so much that it doesn't play like Dead Island anymore. The problem is that it seems like Techland thought everything in the first game was perfect, and as a result they've changed nothing gameplay wise. So Dead Island Riptide won't win over anyone who didn't like the first game, but at the same time it won't alienate fans of the original either. So while it's easy to criticise Riptide for being all too familiar, it's still a fairly fun co-op game like the original was.
Combat feels the same as the first game. It's still pretty satisfying hacking a limb off a zombie or beating it down with a baseball bat, but the combat does soon get repetitive, usually devolving into kicking the zombie down and then jumping on its head to finish it off. I find this is usually my technique for every zombie I encounter, except for the big thugs,
in which case I just keep circling it and hitting it in the back until it kills over and dies.
Story-wise, Riptide picks up right where the first game left off, and just like the first game, you have to play through an introductory section before you're let loose in the open world. Riptide takes place on a new island, Palanai. It's smaller than the first Dead Island's world, and it's not quite as aesthetically varied, which is a bit of a shame really. As mentioned before, the gameplay is exactly the same as the first game. You accept quests, and then slash, beat and kick zombies all the way to the objective and back. Collect your reward from the quest giver. Repeat. In single player it can get boring pretty fast, but co-op is definitely the intended way to play Dead Island Riptide, and it's a far better experience overall with a partner. There is one new mission type in Riptide, the defense mission, and it's somewhat decent. Where most missions are basically a go here, get this item and bring it back type affair, the defense missions task you with putting up fences and setting up machine gun turrets around your home base, and then fighting for your life when the zombies show up soon after. When you're not caving in zombie skulls, you'll probably be exploring and collecting loot. Loot which you can then use to craft custom weapons such as electrified machetes or flaming shovels. Sadly, exploring and looting in Riptide just isn't as entertaining as it is in, say, Bioshock Infinite, and a lot of the time I just couldn't be bothered with it and pressed on to the next objective. Leveling up and gaining new abilities still plays a part, but only a handful of new abilities have been added compared to the first game. There is a new character to play as though, a hand-to-hand specialist named John. All of his upgrades revolve around up close and personal fisticuffs, so this is probably the biggest change in regards to upgrades and new abilities. I do like that you can import a saved character from the first Dead Island, so you can start with all the upgrades you purchased in the first game, meaning you're not a complete pussy when you start off. I just can't really get enthusiastic for the game on the whole though. It's a pretty decent and fun title at heart, but an abundance of minor problems and annoyances sour the experience. Things like not being able to look behind while driving, which makes reversing a royal pain. Or when you're trying to drive a boat, but a zombie will climb on board every 10 seconds, so you have to time your kick just right, otherwise you'll be hauled out of the boat and mobbed by the undead. How about the dreadful in-game map, which, contrary to its name, doesn't map out the environment at all? The best it does is draw a dotted line telling you where exactly to run to reach your next objective, but only that shows up when it feels like it. Driving is made difficult because the map doesn't show any roads, so I usually end up missing the turn I need and ploughing into a bush. There was also a glitch where the waypoint system obviously couldn't keep up with me, forcing me to walk out of a room and then back in before the game would even let me talk to the guy I needed to. The voice acting for the most part is atrocious.
What happened to you?
Somebody pushed me.
Hey, man, what happened? Who pushed you?
Stay away!
And the plot is... well, I honestly can't remember. My brain usually switched off whenever a cutscene began. This isn't new to Riptide though, and the first game also felt like an interactive B-movie, so this is a criticism of the series as a whole rather than just Riptide itself. But I did notice that the character I was playing as didn't even show up in some cutscenes. For example, there will be a scene where it shows all the survivors running out of a burning building. All of the survivors except for my character, that is. So what, did the guy I was playing as just decide to sit down and burn to death? Anyway, moving on from the plot, let's take a look at the game's options. Everyone likes options. Well, maybe they don't, but PC gamers do. So let's see what Dead Island Riptide provides. Not a lot really. You have the basics like resolution and texture quality, and then just a few extras like shadow, foliage and effects quality, and VSync. A pretty poor offering really. But where the developers fail, the community steps in. If you check out the Dead Island Riptide community hub on Steam, under the discussion section, you'll find a thread titled Dead Island Riptide Helper. This is a great tool that provides further options for tweaking. It allows you to adjust the field of view, toggle motion blur, bloom, weapon refraction and more, and it fixes a stuttering issue which occurs when you play with keyboard and mouse, so I highly recommend getting this tool if you have the game. In conclusion, there's a lot about Dead Island Riptide to criticise, but in doing so it's easy to lose sight of the overall picture. It's not the deepest, most intelligent or most polished game out there by any stretch, and yeah, it definitely has its flaws, but Riptide does provide a fun, cooperative action RPG zombie killing experience, featuring a lengthy campaign for you and your friends to play through, offering many hours of entertainment for those who get into it. For newcomers to the series, I would recommend checking out the first Dead Island instead, and I wouldn't recommend this game if you're planning to play alone. You might still enjoy the game playing solo, but that's not what it was intended for, and it's far more enjoyable to play with friends. If you did enjoy the first game however, there's not really anything for you to dislike about this game, so if you're hungry for some more Dead Island to play through, Riptide is a no-brainer.
Great. Leaves the boats in one piece. Oh, hell. Don't tell me I gotta find the engine now.